Welcome to episode 200 of the Low Blow. I am Justin Goodrum, joined by Jorge Hernandez. What's up, man?
I'm doing pretty good. Hopefully these audio issues here sound like I'm in the Twilight Zone.
Yeah, it sounds like we're in a spaceship. Give me 1 second here. How is that? Can you hear me better?
Beautiful. Live radio, ladies and gentlemen.
Sorry about that, technical issues. Fitting, because I think our first episode had technical issues too. So everything's come around full circle. Of course, we're on southwestfight.com and mymmanews.com. Episode 200, man, we finally made it. Who would have thunk it?
Who would have thunk it indeed? Back in the day when we were working out of Will McClary's small office. I'm sure the guy has a pretty big office, and he's the head honcho back at the university where we used to, actually process these shows out of, man.
Yeah, I remember. I think it was 2009, so it's just crazy how the time went. On today's show, we're hopefully going to have Austin Trout, world champion boxer, onto the show. And also, we're going to run down a lot of the latest topics in MMA. A lot of kind of unfortunate news from the whole War Machine issue to John Jones having to pull out of UFC 178 to also just the whole, I guess, situation with the rumors with Bellator with the women's division. I guess that's positive news. So we'll be discussing that. As always, you can get in touch with the show through social media, Twitter, through @TheLowBlow, and on Facebook as well, Low Blow Podcast. Just type that into the search bar. So, man, I guess let's get into the hot topics first before we give Austin Trout a call.
Sounds good.
Yeah. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you fine. I thought you were going to lead off with the first topic. That was my mistake.
Sorry. I'm still hearing a little bit of an echo in my headphones. I'm trying to get kind of used
to it. No worries.
First, I guess we got to discuss John Jones getting injured against Daniel Cormier. It looks like from rumors on the internet and from the reports from various MMA sites, he tore his meniscus in his left knee during training with Alistair Overeem. Looks like he was going for a takedown and things went wrong from there. So what we understand is that the UFC 178 main event will be Demetrious Johnson versus Chris Carriasso. I guess before we get into the whole John Jones injury, did you see the tweet by Demetrious Johnson? Basically him saying that now they're the real main event of UFC 178. I hope he was joking.
No, he completely is. I'm sure Mighty Mouse has a sense of humor, and I think he needs to show that a little bit more if that is his true nature, just so he can become more likable. You know, he's a great, phenomenal athlete. Great flyweight to be representing that division, but it's just, a lot of people don't like him because they feel he's boring. So if we see a little bit more of this, and I hope it's the real Demetrious Johnson just cracking jokes like this, I think people will come around to him.
Yeah, I agree. I don't know. With him, this is a disconnect of his personality. But at the same time, if you see John Jones's pay-per-view numbers, they're not stellar either. And he has the Nike deal, Gatorade. People despise him or they love him, and his fights are exciting. Yet his numbers aren't reflective of that. So I think for Demetrious Johnson, I'm not sure if it's as easy as him getting a better personality. I think it'd help a lot. But overall, I'm just concerned. John Jones can't be a 500,000 to 700,000 draw on a regular basis, no matter who he's fighting. I mean, what chance does Demetrious Johnson have with a limited personality? But speaking of John Jones, what do you think? I mean, in terms of hurting the UFC, in terms of obviously a big blockbuster fight's gone, and John Jones is hurt with a pretty serious injury. You have Daniel Cormier out there. You have to wait for what's going to happen with Alexander Gustafsson. Is there a possibility of John Jones? It could be a possibility where he says he could be hurt worse than what previously thought and delay the fight past January. Do you see that happening?
And that's scary just because of the fact he apparently hurt it fighting off Alistair Overeem, who's no tiny man himself, even without, the whole, whatever he may or may not have been on. Of course, he's still a big dude, and all that weight may have done some serious damage, and that's a genuine concern. Just because they postponed this card end of September, October, November, December, January. That's almost 4 months, Jay.
Yeah,
it has to be a serious injury, and if it's a serious ankle injury, we're talking Jones might not even be training for another 2.5 months. So I won't be surprised if this gets pushed back to maybe even March, to be honest with you.
Yeah, me either. And that probably means that we're going to have to see Daniel Cormier fight and Gustafsson fight one more time. I just don't see them sitting on the bench for that long. And that puts Anthony Johnson in the mix as well. You never know. If those two guys fight, they get hurt. Anthony Johnson gets into the mix. I mean, things happen. So certainly just unfortunate after the brawl and after all the media commotion. Now that's kind of on the back burner until these guys actually do step into the octagon in January. Another unfortunate news story, this refers to John Copenhaver, more known as War Machine, on the run from the law from Nevada police. Basically got into a physical altercation with his ex-girlfriend, porn star Christy Mack. I think a physical altercation is kind of a understatement. I mean, he beat her up pretty badly, and now the police are on the hunt for Copenhaver. I understand that there's a fundraiser to raise money for Christy Mack. I understand, I think $30,000 has been raised, and this story has now hit the national media. I mean, this is on CNN. You have Doc, the bounty hunter, now involved. It's pretty ugly. What's your thoughts on this, Jorge, in terms of how this affects the sport in a negative way? I think you take a look, Josh Grisby was in the news for domestic violence issues as well in the last couple of weeks. I think because Copenhaver is not a UFC fighter, he's known as an MMA fighter. I think this is kind of gasoline on a fire. I think if we hear in the next couple of months of a high-profile MMA fighter in the UFC in a domestic violence dispute, this could get ugly.
I completely agree with you. Is it weird that it kind of helps that those other things are going on? I mean, the Ray Rice issue, him only being suspended 2 games by the NFL for, punching out his wife and then dragging her by the hair. Greg Oden, whose name we haven't really heard of, since he graduated from Ohio State, playing basketball. Now his name has come up for some domestic issues that have come up in his household. So I'm not sure if, those issues going on does help the fact that this isn't MMA related, but definitely does. This hurts it just because you think of these guys, the average fan think of these guys as just, just crazy, it's just out there. And, War Machine, if you follow him on Twitter at all, we've talked about this in the past. He was a bizarre guy and just had a lot of emotions coming on, whether it was extremely inappropriate or just extremely somber moods that he would express on that Twitter. And to be honest, Jay, it's sad to say this, but I was not surprised when I heard this story that he was crazy enough to do something like this. It's unfortunate because not just Christy Mack, but what her friend experienced there. If he, in fact, was there just as a friend, even if he was there, let's say, hooking up with her, Jay, for someone to go that crazy, I could say, okay, beat up the dude for cheating on you. I mean, that's what you see in the streets. It's natural for you to want to beat up the guy that might, allegedly be hooking up with your girlfriend, or if you think that. It's one of the first things to go through you. But to take it out on her, it's just unbelievable. For someone just to snap like that and almost kill 2 people in an instant almost.
Yeah, this guy's a sociopath. I mean, there's no other way to put it. This guy's out of his mind. Hopefully, if they do capture him, they can get him some help, because I just think this guy is going to have to be either locked up forever or he's going to have to receive some psychiatric care if he's going to be able to just rehab his life, forget about fighting in a MMA cage anytime soon. I believe Austin Trout, our guest, is ready. Bear with us. We're going to give him a call and see if we can have him on the show. Just give us a couple of minutes.
Hitting him up now.
Hello?
Austin Trout.
Yes, sir.
Welcome to the 200th episode of The Low Blow. How are you, sir?
I am a lot better now that I get to be on the 200th episode. And not only that, I get to be on with my girl Holly Holm, who just signed with the UFC. Kidding me? This is a good day.
Yeah, hopefully she actually comes on. We were supposed to have her before you, but she may have big-timed us. Thank you for not big-timing us, Austin Trout.
Hey, it's quite all right. I'm still working on that.
Now, on August 22nd, you'll be fighting in Temecula, California, against Daniel Dawson in your first fight in 2014. So the first question we got to ask, why did it take so long to get you a fight here in 2014?
I had to get a lot of things together, personal. Had to get my mind right. And then again, all the things had to come together in order for me to get a fight right. So it took a while, but the time was needed, and I'm happy. I'm happy to be back now.
Now, be honest. Had you ever heard of Daniel Dawson before this fight?
Yes, I have actually. I was in negotiations to fight with Anthony the Bum Dean, and they was like, well, what about Daniel Dawson if Anthony doesn't come through? And the thing, it never worked out that way. So I have heard of him beforehand. He's like probably the second best junior middleweight in Australia under Mundine, and probably number one now since Mundine just got his butt whooped by Claudia.
Hey, Austin, this is Justin Goodrum. I just wanted to ask you, what have you done during your layoff? What kind of aspects on your game have you improved on during this long period outside of the ring?
The first thing I had to make sure I got done was I had to get my feet right. In the last couple of fights that I lost, I was really over my feet, which would, in a sense, help me get hit easier. Now I'm on top of my feet, got my feet right. All punches start from the feet. So I got that ready. I got that fixed. I'm also getting back to just fighting my style, fighting for me. One thing I didn't do after Canelo fight is I didn't go back and just work on the things I needed to improve on as a fighter for myself. Instead, I had a whole bunch of personal problems, and not just problems. I also got married and had my honeymoon, which was great. And then I had a litigation with my promoter, and instead of the whole time working on me, I just jumped on camp and started working on Laura. So, instead of fixing me first, I just try to make myself available or ready to fight. Some of my trick is Laura, and really I should just implement my own style, my own game plan, and do that, and which we do. We're going to make him adjust to me instead of the opposite.
Now, one of the troubles that you had over in 2013, or one of the issues that you did deal with, I should say, was the passing of your grandmother. How difficult was that on you?
It was the most difficult thing I think I've had to go through. And then not just, losing her, she passed at my wedding, which was very bittersweet. She was able to be there, watch me say my vows. And, she was having a good time the whole week that she was there. She came down a week ahead and joined in all the festivities of a wedding. And then after I said my vows, she pretty much walked back and passed in the bathroom. So, it was a beautiful tragedy if you think about it. And I really never got over that. And then to go and fight in Brooklyn, as my next fight, which is where she was from, during camp I broke down quite a few times just thinking of going back to Brooklyn without going to see my grandmother. She always took me to these spots, these good places to eat, and it just wasn't the same, without her. So that definitely had an impact on my mind going into any fight. And really, I'm not taking anything away from Laura because, he had an impact on, definitely he was a big part of why I looked so bad. I played into his game plan, and I never implemented my own. And really, if I just stuck with my game plan, it would have been a real boring fight. And that's the way it should have been, a boring fight, but nonetheless, I would have been more effective.
Now, what do you think you lacked the most in that Lara fight?
Just snap, I couldn't get my hands moving. I couldn't let them go. The fluidity, everything was forced. The fluidity, I think, was the thing I lacked the most in the Lara fight.
Now, also after that match, you were taken to the hospital for precautionary reasons. How did that everything turn out? And, when were you allowed to get back to training after that?
They gave me 30 days of time off, which I was going to take anyway. I needed to get my head together, like I said before. And, but, I was ready to get back. And I was in the gym after the Lara fight, brief, not going super hard, but just try not to lose too much of a step. and it's really paid off because again, I was able to get into camp in shape, and so it wasn't about getting back in shape. It was just about, getting sharp again.
Austin, this latest fight is going to be on ESPN2. Can you describe the different media obligations compared to fighting on Showtime? Is it less? Is it more?
Well, there's hardly any. There's no media workout. There's no press conference. It's just weigh in and fight, which is cool because you don't have to jump to no hoops. But at the same time, I like talking to the media. It's something I enjoy, and it's all about getting back to where I should be. And don't get me wrong, ESPN is still a big platform in my eyes. I hear a lot of people on Twitter talking about, oh, he's on ESPN now. What a step back, because I don't feel like it's a step backwards at all. Because I was, at one point, very recently, I couldn't buy my way onto American TV. So, as long as I'm still, and also I'm on the main event. I'm not in the undercard nowhere. I'm doing main event ESPN, which has more viewers. So I'm happy to be on the network.
There was a similar situation when I last spoke to John Molina Jr. John Molina, of course, was, what I think is the fight of the year against Lucas Matisse this year. He fought Antonio DeMarco for a world title on pay-per-view, and then he fought Danny Williams here in New Mexico on an ESPN card. And I asked him, how does that motivate you from go to the championship fight down to ESPN? He told me that it says, hey, you guys have a job to do. It doesn't matter where it's at. You just show up and do it. Is that this? And he said that it's the same feeling that he has. Doesn't matter where. I do my 8-10 hours a day just like you. Is that the same sentiment that you feel as well, no matter where it is?
Absolutely. Even if this wasn't televised, I'm just happy to be able to work. I feel so out of work when I don't have a fight, and the only question people want to know is, when's the next fight? When's the next fight? So just to be able to have a fight, and, it didn't matter if it was, I told him, I said, if I have to go back to Mexico or Panama or anywhere else, I'd do it and be more than happy to do it because, this is my job, and I'm going to work just as hard as I would if it was a pay-per-view match or if it was a Telemundo match. It doesn't matter. I still want to come in and give my best.
Be honest. Would you really go back to Panama?
Absolutely. Panama was wonderful.
Now, with regards to this fight that you're having against Daniel Dawson, what do you think you need to do to put your name back on, on the mainstream map with regards to boxing?
Of course, I need to win. That's first and foremost. I can't afford another loss. And win in good fashion would be great. But, we're going to win first, and we're going to bedazzle second. But I have a feeling that the way I'm feeling right now, and the way I've been working, the way I've been performing here in the gym, and the way I've gotten back to my old undefeated self, it's going to be nothing less than a great performance on my part.
Now, 200th episode. What was your favorite moment with us? When I lit you up on that court?
That had to be one of them. Yeah, I would say so. I won my 3 match. You smashed me in the second one. But in my defense, my arms were tired. I just got them working out. What did you do all day?
That's a very good point. I drove 3 hours to go see you. That's all I did there. So I guess with regards to training and everything that's going on, I guess we'd be remiss to not mention that currently you're in Houston, Texas. What have you seen there in Texas that you previously didn't have? I think a little bit during the Lara match you were out there training, but what specifically do you find beneficial there in the city of Houston?
Well, the humidity kicks your butt. Let me tell you, altitude training is one thing, but training in this humidity and this heat, that in itself is getting you tough to get your mind right. I also had coming in here with Bobby Ben. He has another set of eyes that I really appreciate his opinion and how we have a good rapport with each other. And Louis Burke's out here too as well. But also, don't call me cheap about it, but it saves me a lot of money. Instead of having to bring in all these sparring partners in from various places and have to, put them up, feed them, get the travels, and whatever else they might need, Houston has got no shortage of gym warriors. We can find sparring at the drop of a dime. And good sparring, hard sparring, whatever type of style you need, what type of style, flavor you want, they got it here in Houston. And, that's really why. It helps save me a lot of money.
earlier in the month, Austin, you attended a fight with Brandon Whitaker. Can you kind of describe the talent in Texas? And also, too, I understand there's a big fight card in San Antonio, Texas, the Battle of the Ballpark. Can you kind of discuss that as well in terms of what kind of rising talent in Texas that fight goers might see on that night?
Well, there's a bunch of talent here in Texas. And again, you got a lot of warriors that really put everything on the line. The Battle of the Ballpark is going to be another showcase of that. These guys are really untapped talent and have not been spoiled by the game. So you won't get divas that expect this, that, and the third. These guys come in, they're just happy to fight. They're like, oh, we're getting paid for this too? Are you kidding me? I'm really going to punish this guy. So that's why I came here is for that untapped talent and why, you're going to see a lot of rising stars coming out of Texas, I believe. And New Mexico's the same way, in my opinion. We got a lot of untapped talent, a lot of hungry guys. Just want to showcase what they're made of.
Again, Austin Trout takes on Daniel Dawson August 22nd from the Pechanga Resort and Casino in Temecula, California. Woo, boy, you're going to be in San Diego.
Yeah, I'm excited, but I've never been to San Diego, so this will be a first for me.
Oh, man, you're going to love it. But, Austin, thanks a lot for joining us tonight, and for every other time that you've helped us out here, we really appreciate it, man.
Anytime, George, anytime you want to call me, Jorge, you got my number, man. I would be more than happy to, and I thank you guys for putting me on and still thinking of me.
Of course, man.
Of course.
At No Doubt Trout, make sure you guys follow him. Instagram, Twitter, what else are you on? Pinterest.
Facebook.
What else are you?
I ain't on Pinterest. Yeah, man. But yeah, Instagram, Twitter, at No Doubt Trout.
Excellent. We look forward to seeing you back on the 22nd, Friday Night Fights, ESPN.
I look forward to being back. Thanks. Have a good one, guys.
Have a good night.
Thanks, Austin. Appreciate it.
Always a good interview there.
Yeah, man. Honestly, he's probably the first major guest we've had on the show, and consistently always comes on. I mean that just shows you how humble he is and how really he hasn't changed over the years, over the high points and the low points. He's still the same Austin Trout. That's a perfect example.
And it sounds like, he knew the opportunities that he's had and he's appreciated it. But, the confidence that's within him, it's basically like, I've been here before. I've had to prove myself a lot more than I have to right now, is what it sounds like. Just because if you think about it, he mentioned, hey, I went to Panama, I went to Canada, I went to Mexico to defend my title, and I couldn't buy my way into American TV. And we've talked about it time and time again, how much he actually fought for that. I believe he defended his title 3 times on before being broadcasted by a national platform, which is pretty crazy for an American fighter. So nonetheless, humbled, and I definitely see that he can make his way to the top. Let's not forget, he's only 28 years old, Jay.
Yeah, still young in the sport, and I think partly because of kind of mixed martial arts, the mentality of I think. Certainly, correct me if I'm wrong, in the 90s and early 2000s, a loss in boxing would pretty much spell the end of your career or the end of you being pretty much relevant in terms of being the top tier. But now, you lose, it's a big deal, but it's not something that's going to ruin your career, if that makes any sense.
No, I completely agree with you. It's something that people can battle from. And, look, Erislandy Lara just lost his fight. None of us think that he's headed back down the gutter because of that. And look, who else? Who's pretty relevant right now, Jay, that lost a fight to Austin Trout? Miguel Cotto almost reinvented himself. Or I shouldn't say reinvented himself because he beat up a hurt Sergio Martinez. But nonetheless, he put himself back on the national spotlight. And a guy like Trout, I can definitely see it's a tough 154-pound weight class. There's a lot of young guys coming up. You brought up Texas. Those Charlo boys are out of Houston. Both the twins there are ready to make noise. So it's a loaded division. And a division where I think all of those guys can actually beat each other. I don't think anyone's going to come undefeated out of that unless, Canelo continues to be awarded fights. They're not robberies, but they're pretty close, and he's going to keep winning those. So he's the only guy that will remain undefeated in that weight class, if anything.
Exactly right. There's a couple more news stories real quickly. We'll run down here. What do you make of the situation between Andre Ward and Gennady Golovkin? I'm going to read you this quote, Jorge. Of course, both parties are trying to make a fight, presumably, in 2014. But here's a quote from a representative of Andre Ward. Here's his quote. All you have to do is look at the ratings at these two men draw? Let's start with the ratings. Andre Ward, coming off major shoulder surgery and a layoff over a year, did a 1.3 rating on HBO. Gennady Golovkin just fought, was supposed to be the biggest fight of his career in the biggest room in Madison Square Garden, with most of the fans there, and that was his night. You know what he did? A whole lot of nothing. He did half the ratings that Andre Ward did. Is this just a cop-out to get really out of this fight with Gennady Golovkin, or does Andre Ward's team have a point here in not wanting to fight a guy who doesn't draw yet?
No, that's... I'm not sure, because Ward personally has said before in the past that he would be willing to fight him. And I think the fact that the Ward camps feel that they're being a little slighted, sort of a y'all must have forgot about us. But, I mean, for obvious reasons, he hasn't been consistent enough in boxing. And Gennady Golovkin is the flavor of the month right now. And he, as he is every month that he fights, to be honest.
Pretty much.
But... Yeah. But I think that's where it comes from. The fact that people are saying, "Oh, he should fight someone in a higher weight class," i.e., here Andre Ward, for example. So I think both parties can say a lot. Gennady Golovkin's party tends to stay a little more quiet than what's going on. Yeah, he's not doing the ratings, but guess what? He's doing the job and knocking people out. So if he keeps doing that, eventually he's gonna not become a household name, but have a pretty good following here in the U.S., especially if his English starts, getting a little bit better. But, I mean, let's not get it wrong. If he does go up to 168, that's going to be a tough fight. I don't think it's even competitive. I think Andre Ward outboxes him from the outside and makes it dirty on the inside, as he always tactfully has actually done.
Yeah, I'll put it this way. If he handily beats Andre Ward... I think there's going to be no one's going to want to fight this guy.
I mean, do we want to see that fight? Whether we think it's a butt kicking or one side or not? Heck yeah, we want to see it. Those guys are the top. I'd say both of them are, top 10. I would be willing to go top 10 pound for pound, both of them.
Agreed. Moving on, and this is just a weird story, Jorge, concerning Bellator. It's not weird in terms of them signing two women. That's Marlis Kunin, 21-6, and Julia Budd. They've signed with the promotion and will fight with Bellator later this year. But this story, man, with Gina Carano, this came out of nowhere.
It did.
A couple of days ago, there was serious rumors reported by serious insiders that Gina Carano was going to sign a deal with Bellator. And at first, you know how people hate on the UFC. Like, oh, here comes Bellator. They're going to take over the UFC, all this ridiculous talk. But to me, I think this is a perfect situation. It's good for Bellator because it brings them a kind of a new promotion in terms of their fighters. Gina Carano will bring the media attention. Number one. Number two, she gets to fight at a weight class she doesn't have to cut weight. And number three, for the UFC, I mean... really, Bellator does all the dirty work for the UFC. If she loses, then it's on Bellator's hands, not the UFC. If they happen to have a fight at 135, that's great because you can know if she could make weight or not. I mean, all the risk is on Bellator. If this does happen, this is fantastic for the UFC. What's your opinion of this if Bellator happens to pull this off?
It'll be unbelievable if they're able to pull something like that out because they're pulling the rug right underneath the UFC. Here we are the last few months talking about how there isn't really any competition for Ronda Rousey. And if, they were thinking of bringing in Carano, Holly Holm, Cyborg, of course, into the mix to be able to challenge her. But if Bellator takes half of those fighters, they're really left with nothing. I mean, if all the UFC is left with is Ronda Rousey and Holly Holm as their top two people. Obviously, Kat Zingano's still around. Not dismissing her or her talents by any stretch, but these names that they're hoping to build, it's going to be difficult to build it. And after a while, Ronda Rousey's just going to become a sideshow, and it's going to lose attention. She's beating all these people, but yet two of the top four fighters that can challenge her are in a completely different organization. Oh. It just makes you wonder how. What's Scott's last name? Coker?
Yeah, Coker.
Okay. If he felt so bad for missing that Holly Holm train just barely. He showed up late to the party because he was invited late to the party, meaning that he just took this position with Bellator. Obviously, discussions between Holly Holm and the UFC had already begun. Bellator had a relationship with Holly Holm, and I wonder how much he's beating himself for not coming into or not being into the game a little bit sooner. So, or maybe he's not. He can still build a name off the other women, but Jay, you're going to have a Strike Force UFC type of thing where you have some of the best fighters in the world in two different divisions and two different promotions where they can't fight one another. That's what's going to happen, man.
I disagree with you. I think
challenge me.
Well, one, UFC has a direct pipeline of talent, and that's Invicta. And honestly, with Strike Force, in my opinion, they did a mediocre job of their women's division. It wasn't until the UFC bought them until they turned Ronda Rousey into a star. I mean, let's just keep it real. It was Zero behind her, not Scott Coker. And really, you take a look at the Gina Carano situation. Who did she have to fight? She had no one. I mean, after she got destroyed by Cyborg, and Cyborg was a legit star. They were talking about her on SportsCenter, and instead of capitalizing on this killer that destroyed the face of women's MMA, she remained inactive. And that's on Scott Coker, even unfairly or fairly. That's his fault. And so to me, I don't really see anything different changing here. I mean, they got Julia Budd and Marlis Kuna and Gina Carano. They don't have Gina Carano. Right now they have two women. Honestly, Shannon Knapp has proven she has a track record of creating stars out of nowhere. 10 months ago, we didn't hear about Jessica Penne or Bat Hyatt or the 125-pound division, but because of Invicta, they made that relevant. And who has a deal with Invicta at the UFC? So as long as that deal is still going, the UFC is going to have the advantage. And honestly, they'll put on this fight, and until they sign, again, as I said about the UFC, the same thing I'll say about Bellator. Until they sign 6 women to this division, I'm not taking it seriously. And with
Agreed.
the UFC, immediately, they not only didn't they sign Ronda, but immediately they got Liz Carmouche, they got Misha, they got Kat, they got Sarah McMahon. They slowly started to add people. So right now, I'm kind of shrugging my shoulders, and I'm not really impressed. I think Marlis Kuna and Julia Budd are great fighters. I think they're a good starting point. But right now, I believe this division, it's 145 pounds, which is the toughest division in Bellator. The toughest division to build women's talent in the sport. There's no 145-pound division in the UFC, and there is kind of with Invicta. Honestly, their pipeline is Invicta, and right now they belong to the UFC. So, to me, I'm a lot less optimistic about Bellator's chances than you are, Jorge. Ultimately, I hope you're right in a way that there's more talent, and that means, more exposure for women's fighters. But for now, man, I just think, you got 2 fighters. I think you can make a couple of decent fights that kind of make that cash grab with Gina. It kind of reminds me of, what's happening with the light heavyweight division in Bellator with King Mo and Rampage. You got 2 guys there, and then you have a couple of other mediocre fighters that no one cares about. It's kind of the same thing with, Bellator. They're going to have 3 fighters max, and then kind of some tomato cans for Okunin and Bud to beat. Until they get Gina Carano. So I'm a little bit less optimistic. Maybe I'm just a Debbie Downer, but for right now, I'm just not truly that impressed.
Boo that man. I just think, I shouldn't say that anything Scott Coker's touch turns into gold, but at least turns into silver as far as I'm concerned. So
sure.
for him to put his nose and budge into the women's division, I don't see this just being a one-time thing, like a one fight, unless you have the 2 women fight 6-7 times in the next 2.5 years against each other. Something else is up, something else behind the scenes. He might have a pipeline. He's might be already stalking, to I guess use a random term, but the women that are currently either set to have their contract expire with the UFC or who has already expired. Something else is up that we're not completely aware of, I think.
Well, Julia Budd and Marlis Kuna, and I'm trying to phrase this in the right way, I don't believe they can fight at 135. It's a tough weight cut for them.
Sure.
So they were never in the picture to fight Ronda Rousey in the first place. So you're not taking talent away from Ronda to fight. And even with Gina Carano, that's a circus anyway. So,
I completely agree about that fight.
I don't really see the negative for UFC here. We'll see what happens. I think if anything you've seen from Bellator, you've seen guys in talent want to leave. Now, we'll see if that changes with Scott Coker. But certainly, maybe I'm jumping the gun here and kind of bashing this division. Maybe give it a couple of weeks and they'll sign more women. But for now, I'm kind of in a wait-and-see mode. One more thing I wanted to mention before we move on to recapping some boxing matches and previewing this weekend's fights. That is the RFA, a regional MMA promotion, is going to make its Albuquerque debut at the Albuquerque Convention Center. Jorge, do you have a date on that? I believe that's September 12th. Is that correct?
September 12th, that is correct. And because of some breaking news that happened today, the main event has changed. No exact update if the co-main event is moving to the main event, but of course, because Albuquerque's Joby Sanchez was signed by the UFC, he is, pretty likely, or not likely, I should say, certainly out, because he signed a 4-fight contract with the UFC.
Yep.
He's out of that in the main event, so it's going to be very interesting to see who they played. Either way, it's a solid card. Ulysses Gomez, who is a veteran and no slouch himself, is taking on Abel Colum in the co-main event. For people that don't know Abel Colum, we've never covered him because when we started this MMA stuff, he was kind of at the tail end of what was, what I'd like to call his first career. He's basically a legend out of, southern New Mexico, training in his father's garage. Him and his father have been training. This guy's been a part of a lot of international promotions, especially in Japan. So a name that Albuquerque, New Mexico fans haven't heard in a while is returning after a 3-year hiatus there in the main event. So nonetheless, they can definitely play off the return of Abel Colum. But Matt Manzanares, who is the flyweight champion who was supposed to fight Joby Sanchez, I'm sure they'll be able to find an opponent. At least, Arizona's loaded with a lot of 125ers, and who knows, maybe even someone here, maybe even Nick Urso out of Jackson's MMA gym can step in and take that section, or excuse me, that bout there that Joby is now avoiding because of his move to the UFC.
Yeah, and I think as we've seen a lot of familiar face, I think Adrian Cruz is on his card as well.
Yes.
A lot of fighters that fought in the local Bellator cards, fought in the local AAA MMA cards are on his card as well. And I want to ask you, since this is RFA, do you know if this is going to be on Access TV or not?
Yes, RFA comes on Access, and it is scheduled to air live on Access TV that evening. Another thing about RFA, for people that do not know, the main guy behind all of that is Ed Suarez, manager of guys like Renan Barão and Anderson Silva. So a guy with a lot of experience, a lot of this is a pipeline type of organization to the UFC. So it's possible that if Matt Manzanares would have beat Joby Sanchez, that maybe he would have gone to the UFC. But Joby Sanchez obviously takes a little bit of a shortcut here by not having to fight that card to finally reach that goal of making the Ultimate Fighting Championships.
Yeah, and you know how it goes, man. I mean, you have a lot of short days notice. And
yeah, when opportunity calls, man, you got to go. Yeah, even if it's 11 days notice, and I guess we can talk about this a little bit. Sure. He's taking on Wilson Reese, a tough Brazilian with a 17-5 record. I know Joby just defeated, Antonio Banuelos, who's a WEC vet, UFC vet, but this is a guy in Wilson that, still I guess you can consider in his prime, and 17-5 is not a bad record. So Joby's got his work cut out for him fighting in less than 2 weeks again.
Well, it's amazing with Joby because, again, we saw this guy fight in a high school gym. I'm trying to think what year. I think that was his amateur debut, or
yeah, it was. I think it may have been. He was already the Que Loco cage fighting champion. That's at that bantamweight weight class. I think is what he was fighting at. So may have been his second, third, maybe MMA fight as an amateur. But high school gym. Now the UFC. It's amazing to see him grow.
Yeah, it just shows you just the abundance of talent. And it shows how truly, I know it sounds kind of corny, but, if you have talent and if you stick with it, you can make it to the big show. I mean, especially here in New Mexico, there's plenty of connections. And if you get with the right team, it's highly likely that you're going to be ending up, earning a substantial living if you have the talent and the work ethic. So good for Joby. We're looking to have him on the show in the future, but absolutely, it's just really cool to see him just rise as a fighter. We've seen him, go to the XFC and then move the other organizations to now the UFC. It's really cool to see that.
It definitely is. It's pretty amazing to see the growth of a lot of the guys here. I mean, it's just not him.
Yeah.
How that takes place, that has taken place here. So definitely something that we're excited about, and he won't be the last, man. I mean, a native New Mexican coming out is we're a mecca.
Yeah, no doubt. Let's get to some of these other topics real quick. I know you pretty much hated this card last week with Danny Garcia against Salka here. Pretty much destroyed Salka in the second round, vicious knockout. A lot of people pretty much criticizing this card in terms of it not providing competitive matchups. I guess I'll ask you this question again. Was this a blip on the radar in terms of, Showtime just the schedules ended up this way and we got the card that we're presented, or do you think this is a trend where we're going to see less competitive matchups and more kind of lopsided fights?
That depends on what's happening in the background with the budget.
Yeah. Just
because they can't continue to put, these type very competitive fights. They can't, to give you an example, Garcia versus Lucas Matisse was on pay-per-view. I don't know if Showtime can continue to have fights where they have those guys at that talented level on, I guess premium cable. It's not free cable, obviously, because you're paying the extra $10, $15 a month for Showtime. But I don't think that's enough to pay those fighters for tough fights. So it might be a trend that we see, hopefully not as often, because Showtime took so much criticism, even from the national media. Yeah. You had the national media like Dan Rafael and some others literally mentioning Steve Espinoza, the program director for Showtime Sports, and saying, hey, this is a terrible card, and Espinoza did his best to try to defend himself, but it's hard to defend yourself for this type of overmatched and overwhelmed fight. I'm not sure if you saw the knockout, Jay, but Salka caught a hard shot to the mandible that could have done some serious injuries on both his brain, and it was just an outmatched opponent that we saw there. So Garcia did what he had to do. Is it his fault? No. That he was matched up against Salka, or that's the opponent that I don't think Danny Garcia is at that point in his career where he can pick and choose his opponents. Maybe he can influence it a little bit, but this is on the network, I think, and on the promoter the most, I think.
Yeah, it's truly unfortunate because I think you'll agree with this, Jorge. Showtime has been the leader in matchmaking and
phenomenal job up until now, and it's kind of scary. But Jay, I know we're going to touch on it a little bit. I'm pumped for this weekend's card on Showtime.
Yeah, I guess since you brought it up, I know we're supposed to go to the UFC, but let's discuss that now. Sean Porter versus Kell Brook. This is also Sakio Baka facing Anthony Durrell in a 168-pound rematch. Also, Dante Wilder is on this card as well. Tell us why you're excited, and of course, we have interviewed Sean Porter before. What do you expect from this match?
I expect a very good fight. Kell Brook can bring it. For people who don't know who Kell Brook is, just because he's been fighting out in England, Tune in. This guy is actually pretty fun to watch. He's a pretty athletic fighter, has some decent skills in moving, but I think Sean Porter, the odds are close, Jay. I think Kell Brook's only a 2-1 underdog, and Porter's only a 2-1 favorite, which is surprising just because of how good and well Porter has actually performed in his last, maybe 4 or 5 fights. And the excitement about this is that whoever wins this fight is eventually going to fight Keith Thurman for the next bout. How fun would it be to see a Sean Porter versus Keith Thurman bombs away type of fight?
That'd be great.
That'll be the dirtiest, grimiest, just ugh. I got my stinker face right now, E40 style, just thinking about that fight. But nonetheless, you're going power and just almost dirty boxing in a way, I guess, with Sean Porter, and dirty boxing the way MMA fans use it. Not necessarily that he's a dirty fighter. About Sean Porter, he works the inside pretty well. And Kell Brook, who can work from a distance and is a little elusive. So that's a very good matchup. And then we have Sakio Bika versus Anthony Durrell in a rematch of their bout that happened on the Austin Trout card that he was also on with Erislandy Lara. So Bika, Durrell, I enjoyed that fight when I watched it live in person. I'm not sure how it translated over to TV. I never bothered to go back to actually watch it. But this is a rematch of a pretty damn good fight. And Anthony Durrell, again, is hoping to do what Danny Jacobs did recently in winning a world title after defeating cancer. So that's what I'm extremely excited about this contest. And also, Omar Figueroa is on this card against Daniel Estrada, another world title fight, not much. The Deontay Wilder fight, this is just a stay busy fight. Deontay Wilder, 31-0, 31 KOs, is taking on a guy by the name of Jason Gavern, 25-16 record, Jay. This is just like hey, I'm going to add a win/TKO or KO to my record. So it's kind of a dangerous fight if you ask me. I'm not sure how Jason Gavern was, suckered into this bout, but you better be careful because anytime you fight a guy who's 100% KO ratio and you're just a few fights above 500, this kind of stuff scares me, Jay.
So, real quickly, with Deontay Wilder, I mean, right now the heavyweight division is kind of, always up in the air. But in particularly because I think Tyson Fury got hurt, and I think his opponent got hurt too, and the status of the Klitschko brothers is basically unknown. When are we going to see this guy take a huge step in competition? Are fighters in that division afraid to fight him, or do you think he's not at that level yet? Because to me, it doesn't take much to kind of approach that top tier, or to at least have a heavyweight belt, some portion of the heavyweight title at least.
So this is what's going to happen. He is in line to fight for a world title in his next bout. It's escaping me right now. Probably Bermain Stavern, who he's actually going to take on next. Right now, Deontay Wilder is the number 1 ranked fighter in the WBC.
Okay.
But because he wants to stay busy before that bout, I guess this will allow him to do so. He hasn't wasted much energy either in most of his fights. Let's not get it twisted. As far as Deontay Wilder in his competition, it hasn't been best in the world. But Jay, Deontay's I don't think has ever gone past the 4th round ever.
Yeah.
In any of his fights, and I'm looking at it now. Last 4 fights ended in round 1, round 4, round 1, round 1.
Wow.
He needs to stay busy and build up that conditioning a little bit, especially if he's moving on to a world title fight next. So, Jay, I promise you, within the next 8 months, Deontay Wilder will fight for a world title.
I think it brings some excitement. Even Tyson Fury, I know people think he's kind of like a clown and what he does.
Yeah.
It's something. It is some excitement. Something to get people talking. Last topic here: UFC Fight Night 47. Man, I almost said 147. Not there yet. Main event is Ryan Bader versus Ovince St. Preux. Also great. Maynard's on this card as well, taking on Ross Pearson, who's back in action quickly, recovering from one of the worst decisions I've ever seen in my entire life against Diego Sanchez. Tim Bosch against Brad Tavares. Sean Jordan's on this card. Robbie Peralta takes on Thiago Tavares. What do you make of this card, Jorge? Just something on Fox Sports 1 just to kind of kill some time and just kind of turn your brain off.
Fine. If you want to kill some time, by all means do so. I'm definitely watching the boxing that night. I'm not too excited about this card. I know it's kind of an in-between. And let's not get it twisted, Jay. This card was put together because of the presence the UFC wants to have in New England. And, and it makes sense because if I'm not mistaken, that's where Dana White is from. So the first card in Maine going down, give them a card. If it doesn't have to be a world title fight or anything like that, as long as they get a card up there. I mean, the venue that they're having this event in, I think it fits about 7,000 people at the most, I believe. So, okay, it's an okay, good in-between card, and it doesn't hurt that you're having it now when boxing is having one of their best co-main event fights of the entire year.
It's going to be a rough go for UFC events, man. Besides, UFC Fight Night 48 in Macau was a good main event. Michael Bisping versus Kung Lee. And I think obviously the fight nights obviously are kind of better than the pay-per-views. UFC, you have Dillashaw versus Barral, and then you have the unfortunate injury with UFC 178. But nevertheless, it's good that UFC 178 had 2 title fights on there. Excuse me, at UFC 177, I think, had 2 title fights. Now at least you have title fights for UFC 177 and UFC 178, but still, it is going to be a struggle for a long time. You take a look even UFC Fight Night 51, it's Bigfoot versus Arlovski 2 in Brazil. Really, not until, honestly, the best card I'm looking forward to is UFC 52, Mark Hunt versus Roy Nelson. That's in Japan. You have Gomi.
It's going to be exciting. So, just for the hell of it, Jay, main event, Bader and St. Preux, if you want to be phonetically correct.
Preux. There's another one of those guys in the middleweight division I do not like. No worries about Yushin Okami being removed from that middleweight division because there's plenty of guys that I do not like, and this is one of them. I just never been impressed with this guy. I know he's from Strikeforce. I think Bader, he's kind of in a turning point of his career. He's really a big dude. Honestly, if he wins, I wouldn't rule out a kind of move to the heavyweight division. I really don't know what in terms of he's thought about it yet, but he's a large man. I mean, even when you see him, he's pretty muscular. I think he can pull it off. I mean, if Randy Couture can pull it off, I mean, I think it's possible. So I'm not saying that's something that's going to happen, but to me, in this fight, I think Ryan Bader's the better fighter here. And you have to win. If he has to win a boring bout, so be it. Who do you have winning this fight? Who do you have winning the Gray Maynard Ross Pearson though?
Oh, that's going to be a fun fight. I don't know. I think
it's the best fight in the card.
Ross Pearson looks so damn good against Diego Sanchez. I think I'm going with him. That's a super close fight though.
Yeah.
So I'm going Bader. I think he's going to be able to pull it off there with just being able to wrestle. I think he's going to out wrestle and outwork Prue, and maybe a second round stoppage is what I'm going with. But Pearson, Maynard, oh man, that's going to be a tough contest. I don't know if Pearson can work it to a decision. I think he'll finally get it, just because I think the UFC kind of owes him.
I agree, and I'm pulling for Ross Pearson just because we owe you one. So
yeah,
I believe that is it for our show. Anything else, Jorge, you wanted to add before we wrap it up this week?
That's it, man. Thank you for sticking this through. Eventually it looks like things are, moving along with us with, obviously what we're doing here. We're doing with the collaboration with Southwest Fight News. And, obviously now that Combat Sports Weekly is going to launch, we're obviously, we'll be on there with whether it be a roundtable with you or just on a weekly basis with Jody Esquivel and I. So things are coming around. It took us a while, but we're making some little moves, little by little, baby steps.
Don't call it a comeback, man.
Don't call it a comeback.
That's right. As always, you can get in touch with the show through social media. We're on Facebook, facebook.com/Loblo Podcast. Also, we're also available on YouTube, youtube.com/Loblo 505. And of course, as the RFA is coming to town, look for interviews pertaining to that event. Also, we're on Twitter through @TheLowBlow, and also on Podomatic, Spreaker, iTunes, and on Stitcher Radio. Jorge, it's been my pleasure to be hosting your show with you for 200 episodes. Thank you for agreeing to this harebrained idea that we all came up with. I'd like to thank Will McClary, who is our co-host for at least, I would say, 2-3 years. I'd like to thank him for his help. I'd like to thank, Fight Fans Radio, U.S. Combat Sports, for them hosting our show for many years, giving us a shot that no one has before. And, of course, Southwest Fight and MyMMAnews.com for hosting our show currently.
And we'd be remiss without thanking Erica Lewis.
Yes.
I know we said Fight Fans Radio, but thanking her directly for producing the show for a while.
Absolutely. She pretty much produced us every Thursday night, put up with our scheduling changes. Anything we asked of her, she answered. Big shout out to her. Thank you, Erica. So for Jorge Hernandez, I am Justin Goodrum. We will see you next week. Hopefully you enjoyed Low Blow episode 200 on SouthwestFight.com and MyMMAnews.com. We will see you next week.
Peace.